Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie, and this is episode number 1014 for July 23rd, 2023. Coming up in a few minutes.
This was all mentioned about 5.5 years ago into the world that we said, you know, we'd purchase Rosebank and to finally have Spirit after that horrific 2 years in the middle was brilliant, and everybody was just overjoyed to finally fill cask number one.
This week, an all-new set of stills roared to life at Rosebank 30 years after the distillery went silent for what many people believed was forever. I'll talk with Gordon Dundas of Ian Macleod Distillers about the revival on this week's WhiskyCast In-Depth. That's coming up along with the What I'm Tasting This Week department, Behind the Label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Kentucky and Ireland have plenty in common. Two homes of horse racing. Bluegrass music is said to have Irish roots. Okay, it's not the longest list, but the Redbreast Kentucky Oak Edition only strengthens the bond. Finished in sustainably sourced Kentucky oak for a captivating nose and round taste. I see a triple crown in this thoroughbred's future.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
How about a really great 12-year-old Scotch whiskey? I have a stellar recommendation coming up for you in just a minute. Spoiler alert, it's Dewar's 12-year-old.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. Tributes are coming in from whiskey lovers around the world for Paul McDonagh, the longtime owner of the Bon Accord Whiskey Bar in Glasgow, Scotland. Paul passed away this week, just a few days before what would have been both his 64th birthday and his 45th wedding anniversary. Under Paul's leadership, the Bon Accord won numerous awards in UK bar competitions for its selection of both whiskies and beers. His son Thomas runs the pub now and told me in an email this weekend that the family is grateful for all of the messages of support that have been coming in on social media. Paul McDonagh's funeral is set for August 2nd in Glasgow. In other news, Speyburn Distillery is opening to the public for the first time starting August 1st. The 126-year-old distillery opened for a test run during this spring's Spirit of Speyside Festival and won the festival's award for the best new event. Lucas Denoviak of Speyburn says that was all the convincing they needed to start offering tours full-time.
It just works as an opportunity, as the right moment in time, as the right sort of junction in the history of the distillery. It's been for the longest time one of those hidden gems of Speyside. The distillery, a lot of visitors to the region would have maybe passed or driven past in previous years and decades. I think many people were familiar with the roof line and the pagoda, but even locals who would have lived in the area their entire lives wouldn't have visited the distillery in the past. And I think it's right, as the brand grows and continues to gain distribution, continues to acquire new enthusiasts and fans in markets, to obviously make the distillery accessible to the public as well. So I think there's a few reasons. It was about time, but also the 125th anniversary was just the right sort of pretext, if you like.
Give me a sense of what visitors will see on the tour.
One of the things that's really unique about Speyburn, and I mean unique in a true sense of the word, there is no other distillery in Scotland to feature that area or piece of equipment, is the old drum maltings. And I think that was the big draw probably for a lot of people who decided to buy tickets and visit us during Spirit of Speyside. So back in the day, late Victorian era, so this is sort of 1890s, drum maltings were really a bit of a novelty. And while most distilleries still operated floor maltings, the decision was taken to invest in drum maltings at Speyburn, which became operational around 1905. They were decommissioned in the 60s, but they operated for over 6 decades very successfully. and now they remain in place. So 3 floors of maltings, including these massive steel drums on the bottom level, including all the equipment, all the steeps, and everything you can think of. So it really feels, that facility, the maltings on site, it really feels like they just turned the key and left, in the mid '60s, and you can just go back in and try and figure out how that used to work. So in terms of that's a point of interest. This is as unique as it gets. It is truly a piece of Scottish distilling history.
Speyburn will offer 3 tours a day at first on Tuesdays through Saturdays and plans to be open all year round. Also on the tourism front, the Port of Leith Distillery in Edinburgh is getting ready to open its doors. Tickets are now on sale for tours starting October 11th. In addition to Rosebank filling its first barrel this week, we got word that Jacob Call and the Call family have filled the first barrel at their new Western Kentucky distilling company this week. That comes less than 9 months after the project was announced in Beaver Dam, Kentucky. The distillery will focus on contract distilling at first, with plans to release its own brands and open up to visitors later on. We have to talk politics for just a minute now. U.S. and European Union trade negotiators met this week in Brussels to discuss the dispute over steel and aluminum tariffs. If you're a long-time listener to WhiskyCast, you might have thought this was settled a year or 2 ago, but that was only a temporary resolution. Unless a permanent agreement is reached by October, the European Union's tariffs on bourbon and other American whiskies will be reimposed January 1st at double the previous 25% tariff. Needless to say, spirits industry groups have been lobbying both sides to reach a deal. Uncle Nearest is getting ready to roll out its single-barrel Tennessee whiskey throughout the U.S. starting in September. Until now, it's only been available at the distillery in Shelbyville, Tennessee, online, and at a select number of Tennessee retailers. The brand is asking the public to vote on which 5 states should get the first allocation of the single-barrel whiskey. The vote runs through August 2nd, and voters will be entered into a drawing for a 2-night trip to Tennessee to visit the distillery. We have a link in the show notes for this episode at whiskycast.com. New whiskies announced this week. Ross and Squibb Distillery in Indiana, MGP, is releasing a new high rye Remus bourbon. In fact, they're calling it Remus Highest Rye Bourbon because it contains the most rye allowed in a bourbon, 39% unmalted and 10% malted rye. There's no word on pricing. Also out of Indiana, Nashville's Hard Truth Distilling is taking the high road with its new Sweet Mash Rye. The distillery has been winning awards and acclaim for its Sweet Mash Ryes, but master distiller Brian Smith told me there was something missing from the lineup that they solved with the new High Road Sweet Mash Rye.
Our sales, retail, and distributor partners were asking for a lower proof version of our Sweet Mash Rye. Everyone loves the Sweet Mash Rye, but not everyone is interested in a rye whiskey at 117 proof. So instead of taking, our not premium barrels and, blending them together and coming up with a lower proof offering, I actually went through, we do about 5 different rye mash bills. I went through them all and we did a proofing exercise to see which one of those mash bills really shined at a lower proof. And our mash bill 2, which is 55% corn, 55% rye, 36% corn, and the rest in malted barley, did some amazing things when we got it right between 92 and 94 proof. It just, all these amazing maple notes started coming out, and it really shined. So we decided to just take that mash bill and offer that up as our high road rye and let it shine at 93 like it wanted to.
The new rye is a successor to Hard Truth's 2020 Sweet Mash Rye release, but will be a permanent addition to the distillery's range. I'll have tasting notes for it soon at the WhiskyCast website, and we'll hear more from Brian later in our Behind the Label segment. Old Forester is releasing the latest edition in its 117 series, a new bottled and bond bourbon distilled in the spring of 2014. It's available through the distillery's shop in Louisville, online, and at select Kentucky retailers. with a price tag of $59.99 a bottle. And Green River Distilling in Owensboro, Kentucky is out with its first full-proof single-barrel bourbon. It's available exclusively at the distillery for $59.99 a bottle. I'll have tasting notes for it soon at whiskycast.com. Ireland's Teeling Whiskey Company has released the latest edition in its Explorers series. It's a 15-year-old whiskey finished in Japanese Mugi Shochu casks for 4 years. Previous Explorers series releases have been travel retail exclusives, but this one will be available at Irish retailers first before being released internationally. The recommended retail price is €110 a bottle. And finally, we reported in January of last year on the National Trust for Scotland's quest to uncover evidence of early distilling on its lands throughout Scotland. The Trust's team of archaeologists spent a week uncovering a site on Ben Lomond and found traces of an illicit distillery dating back to the early 1800s. Ironically, this week marks the 200th anniversary of the Excise Act of 1823, which allowed for the legal distilling of whiskey with a license and helped put most illicit distillers out of business, at least the ones that decided to not get a license. We'll have more on this story on an upcoming episode. And you can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
We've been busy creating an all-new whiskycast.com website for you, solving some of the problems with the old website, and making the entire site easier to use. Check it out this week at whiskycast.com. Time now for a look at upcoming whiskey events around the world. Our calendar is brought to you by Writer's Tears. Belfast Whiskey Week events continue all week long in Belfast, Northern Ireland. Dave Broom has book signings and tastings sponsored by the Scotch Malt Whisky Society, starting Tuesday in Denver, Wednesday in Los Angeles, Thursday in San Francisco, and Friday in Seattle. The Whiskey Show is coming up August 5th in Melbourne, Australia. Tasmanian Whiskey Week runs from August 7th through the 13th in and around Hobart, Tasmania. And Whiskey Live Perth is August 11th and 12th in Perth, Australia. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The calendar is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copper Pot, an 18th century style of premium Irish whiskey, blended from single pot still and single malt. Like yourself, it's one of life's treasured rarities, and what's rare is wonderful. Writer's Tears Copper Pot.
Gabriel here. The new Dewar's 12-year-old has been completely remastered to be richer, smoother, and more balanced. It's a total winner. It's double-aged in first fill premium bourbon casks for greater depth and breadth of flavor, with notes of apples, lemon zest, and spicy and floral notes with a long, smooth vanilla finish. The experts agree too. It's winning awards like pros sink putts. In fact, WhiskyCast's own Mark Gillespie gave it a 94-point rating, which is pretty amazing for a 12-year-old Scotch. It's also earned a 94-point rating from Whiskey Advocate. That makes it their highest-rated 12-year-old Scotch whiskey. It's an excellent testament to the skill, craft, and refinement of the world's most awarded blended Scotch whiskey, Dewar's. Drink responsibly. Copyright 2023 Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey, 40% alcohol by volume.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlach and the Classic Malts lineup. This week, the stills came to life at Scotland's Rosebank Distillery for the first time since it closed in 1993. It's been 5.5 years since Ian Macleod Distillers acquired the rights to the Rosebank brand from Diageo and announced plans to rebuild the distillery in Falkirk. They filled the first cask of whiskey on Tuesday, and Gordon Dundas was there.
It's been a bit of a journey, yeah. Obviously, through COVID and a whole range of other things, it's been a little bit of a journey. But to have now spirit running through the stills is fabulous, and obviously, very much in the style of what Rosebank should be. So we're very excited.
And you're trying to replicate the original Rosebank style, right?
Yeah, look, we're aware it's not going to be identical, but of course, there's a reason we've got the same shape stills and the worm tub condensers. I think arguably Rosebank's one of the most spirit-led whiskies in Scotland. Really focused on its. If you look at all the old Rosebanks, historically, all refills will be looking to produce the same style, and we're very excited about it.
What went into getting this distillery up and running again? What was it like before?
Well, I mean, historically and famously, the stills were stolen. Then it became, to be honest, a pigeon graveyard, if we're honest. And it was a pretty horrific sort of mess of a place. And a lot of design, a lot of understanding of how we want the place to feel. There was no flow in the old Rosebank. Everything was all over the place. There was no, if you didn't know much about whiskey, you'd be like, why is that over there and that's over there? And, it just didn't, even as a whiskey person, I was like, why have they done that way? Now it just flows beautifully, and, you can see the stages of production, and you see the three stills beautifully. And so a lot of effort, obviously it's taken a little bit of money as well. But also just, I think, a dedication to get it done. It's not an easy site. The site is a very unique sort of corner site. So there's been a lot, and add in COVID, and you can imagine a lot of the issues that came through for us. But we're absolutely getting there, and with a view to be opening to the public in 2024. So we're going to have a bit of time to recruit and time to train up people, and then we'll be into it in 2024 in terms of people visiting and paying for tours and understanding what Rosebank's all about.
You mentioned three stills. Are you triple distilling?
We are triple distilling indeed, yes. So we have the three stills are pretty unique, actually. I remember speaking to Malcolm about them. We have a flat top wash still, which I think was a flat top, so it fitted into the old building. These are the kind of idiosyncrasies we love about whiskey. And then we have a very tall, thin intermediate still, which I remember speaking to Malcolm when they went in, and he said, if it was me, Malcolm Rennie, our distillery manager, he said, you'd expect the taller still to be the third still and the middle one to be the shorter, slightly sort of dumpier still. But no, Rosebank's third still, our final distillation, is a short, much more short, dumpy still compared to the intermediate. So these are the sorts of, beautiful things that make all of our distilleries around Scotland different, but for me, makes Rosebank really, really something special.
And not many distilleries in Scotland are triple distilling. That's generally reserved for the Irish side, right?
Yeah, no, not many. Auchentoshan's probably one of the most famous. Used to work for Auchentoshan. It produces a very light spirit up at 80% alcohol or so. I can't. Then there's obviously a few that do it occasionally. I know Ben Riach used to do it occasionally, and obviously there's Hazelburn. I think there is. I'm not sure. I think there might be another distillery triple distilling, but I'm not 100% sure who that is. But very, very few. Very few are triple distilling in Scotland. You can count them literally, I think, on one hand, if that. So yeah.
What else did you do to try to replicate the original Rosebank character?
Well, the other thing that, of course, is a little bit odd that, if you think of triple distillation, you probably think of a lighter style spirit, which, Rosebank was named by many King of the Lowlands, and that was down to firstly how it was appreciated by blenders as a top dresser blend, but also as laterally as a single malt in the sort of 80s, 90s, and 2000s. And Michael Jackson was a huge fan of it. But I think the thing that made it really different was the fact that it has worm tub condensers, which, most distilleries in Scotland use shell and tube condensers. Worm tub condensers, I think there's about 20 odd distilleries who use worm tub condensers. Effectively a coil in a pool of water for as a very simple explanation. And they generally are understood to produce a slightly heavier spirit, a slightly more meaty spirit, sometimes arguably a little bit less copper contact through that process. So that combined with triple distillation is a very unique spirit setup. I think probably one of the most in Scotland, and arguably why I think Rosebank was so spirit forward, so very. When you drank a Rosebank, you could taste that spirit much more than you could taste cask, and that's really, really been the sort of history of that brand of that whiskey.
What was it like being there when the first cask was filled?
That was brilliant. We had Leonard, who's the owner of the business, Leonard Russell. We had Malcolm Rennie there. We had Jason. We had a few of the team there. It was really, really great just to see finally after, this was, if we actually think about it, we started, this was all mentioned about 5.5 years ago into the world that we said, we'd purchase Rosebank and to finally have spirit after that horrific 2 years in the middle was brilliant, and everybody was just overjoyed to finally fill cask number 1, and it was a refill bourbon barrel. So there you go. That's that. You can tell we're looking to produce a very similar style of spirit. But what's really interesting is that although we're looking to, we've got a great legacy of Rosebank and probably one of the most revered distilleries in the whole of Scotland. What's brilliant is that in 7-8 years when we launch this whiskey, it's got to be very relevant to a market that's going to be 7 or 8 years further on than we are now. And you think how whiskey, and you've seen it, Mark, how whiskey's changed in the last 10 years. What's it going to change in the next 8 years, 10 years? It's going to be, it will be interesting to see. But, Rosebank's got to appeal to a modern whiskey drinker while obviously with that wonderful legacy. So it's an interesting challenge, but we're very excited about it. And it'll be a great whiskey because Malcolm and his team, fabulous distillers, fabulous people to make whiskey.
Now, you've still got some of the original Rosebank stock left, right?
We do, yeah. We do indeed. We, as part of our acquisition of it, we got all the remaining stock between 1989 and 1993. So it shut in 1993. And that's the window of stock that we have, and we obviously have released some of it, and we'll be releasing more of it over the coming years. There's no rush for us, but we want people to have access to some of this, probably one of the most ever decreasing pots of, parcels of whiskey in the industry. So, we're very excited about what's coming with that, and at the same time, obviously producing our new spirit, which we'll be tasting at 1 year, 2 year, and just seeing how it develops. But there's no rush. We're not looking to release a 3 year and 1 day whiskey.
You mentioned that the visitor center will open sometime next year. Give me a sense of what visitors are going to be able to experience when they come to Rosebank.
Well, I think, what's really interesting is we're going to have things for everybody. We're going to have people who want to understand a little bit more about Rosebank. We've got tours that obviously people want to come and drink Rosebank, then, that's going to be a tour at a different level. There'll be a whole load of experiences at Rosebank, which I think will cater for everybody. I think what's really important is at the heart of it is firstly where we are. Falkirk and Camelon is really, really important to us, and to engage that community is really, really important. But also the global whiskey world. There's serious amounts of Rosebank lovers out there who want to come and visit the home. Let's face it, it's in the same location. And we can't wait to welcome them. We've just got a few things to get through between now and the end of the year, and hopefully we'll be up to speed, and everybody will be coming in early 2024.
What does this mean for the town of Falkirk?
Look, I think it's a really big thing. I mean, I think there's been a few fallstones with Rosebank for the people of Falkirk. I think they're really genuinely excited to see the distillery finally looking ready to go. The feedback we've had is fabulous. We work very closely with the Falkirk Herald, which is the local newspaper, and they are so excited about it. And we want to ensure that it's considered part of the community, because Rosebank historically was part of the community, and for people to see that the distillery is up and running, and it is a really good thing. So a big part of our sort of engagement will be with the local audience, and they're very proud of it. It's a fantastic town. And I think they're really glad to see their Rosebank producing again.
And a source of jobs for the community.
Well, of course, yeah. There's of course that element. We want to have some people there working from the local community. So we will be recruiting people who can come and give us that beautiful insight into the local area, as well as, of course, Rosebank. So yeah, of course, that goes without saying. Did
you get to taste any of that new make before it went into the first cask?
I might have done. Yeah.
How did it taste?
It did not disappoint, let me tell you. And remember, we're still in the first act of this, So we're very, very excited about how it is. And I'm really excited about, we've pretty much settled on how it's going to be. And it really is a fabulous, fabulous spirit. Let's see what it tastes like in 3 years, 8 years, 5 years, whatever. But the DNA is there for me.
What else is going on with Ian Macleod that we need to know about?
Well, there's quite a lot always going on with Ian Macleod. I mean, just to give people a wee update, we obviously have got Glengoyne, which is, fabulous. We're just putting a new roof on the distillery at the moment. So we've had to adapt our tours during the summer. So we're effectively shut down at the moment, but we're doing these great storytelling tours, which has gone down really, really well. Tamdhu going really, really well globally. I'm off to China to spend a couple of weeks in China talking Tamdhu and Glengoyne, but mainly Tamdhu. I think with Tamdhu, what's really capturing the imagination is the fact we're only using sherry casks. That really puts us in a unique position. And actually, Mark, I'd love your view on it, but I can't think of anybody else who just matures in Oloroso sherry casks from start to finish in Scotland. That's all we use. So I've put that challenge out to people, and nobody's come back and gone, what about these guys? So, the fact that we're doing that really, I think, captures the imagination for Tamdhu, and we have limited stocks of it. So we are where we are with it, but Tamdhu is going really well. And of course, the other exciting aspect of distilleries is we're building one now in Islay with the Islay boys. So anybody who's been to Islay, directly opposite the airport, so between Beaumore and Port Ellen, literally directly opposite the airport. I would say it's going to be called Terminal 2. It's not going to be called Terminal 2. It's going to be called Lagan Bay. But that's hopefully a couple of years away as well. So, yeah, there's quite a lot going on with Ian Macleod. So, yeah, it's an exciting time.
And you just recently introduced the King Robert II, a blend to the U.S.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely. King Robert's a big brand for us. It's a blend which I think is all about driving great taste at a value level. King Robert, I think, has a big following worldwide, and for us to have that over there, absolutely, it's as I said, it's a big brand for us, so it's an important part. And I actually see blends. I think there's going to be next 5 years. I think you're going to see a slightly different blend and blended malt category that's going to change and be a little bit more exciting than it has probably been in the last 10 years.
How so?
Well, I mean, I just think blended malt suffers only from one thing, which is its name. The word blend does not do blended malt any justice. I think blended malt as a category is dominated by the Monkey Shoulder. What a great job they've done. But, there's so many good blended malts out there, and we produce some ourselves. And one that I particularly love that we do is Six Isles, which is a single malt from 6 different islands. It's a brilliant whiskey. You sort of know what you're going to get, but lots of refill in there because you want that spirit character coming through. Because, it's just single malts in a bottle. There's a reason to blend single malts together as much as there's a reason to blend grain and single malt together. So don't ever look down the nose of a whiskey because it says it's a blended malt. Fabulous stuff. Some of them are amazing. And we look at what, brands like Douglas Lane have done with their sort of regional blended malts, what we can do with Sheep Dip and Six Isles and a whole load of other independent bottlers producing great whiskies as well as bigger brands. Blended malt I can see it becoming more and more of a thing.
And it gives us something to drink while we wait for Rosebank. Well,
there is that. Yeah, there is that. There is that. But But yeah, I mean, what's very exciting is that we'll have about 25, we'll have a distillery on Islay, we'll have a distillery in the Lowlands, we'll have one in the Highlands, just across the road from the Lowlands, and one in Speyside. So, it's not bad for a little family-run whiskey business.
Speaking of Rosebanks, the latest vintage release came a couple of weeks ago with a 32-year-old 1990 vintage at the World Duty Free shops in Edinburgh and London's Heathrow Airport. It'll be available at Asian airports starting in August. That's WhiskyCast In-Depth, brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies, comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. I mentioned the King Robert II blended Scotch during our conversation with Gordon Dundas and received a sample of the 12-year-old version recently. It's bottled at 40% ABV. The nose has touches of caramel candy, subtle spices, dried fruits, and honey. The taste is fruity and floral with notes of red apples, pears, allspice, ginger, and honey, while the finish is medium length and fruity. I'm scoring the King Robert II 12-year-old blended Scotch an 88. Next up, Amrut's Master Distillers Reserve Single Malt, selected by Amrut Master Distiller Ashok Chokalingam. It's a single cask bottling at 50% ABV, and the nose has a warm honey aroma, along with black tea, dried fruits, and a hint of ginger. The taste is thick and chewy with black pepper and allspice notes, balanced by dried fruits, honey, and black tea. The finish, long with lingering spices and dried fruits. I'm scoring the Amrut Master Distillers Reserve Single Cask a 93. I'll have more tasting notes in just a minute, but first, our tasting notes are brought to you by Sagamore Spirit, a 200-time award-winning Maryland-style rye whiskey. With a determined focus to create the best rye whiskey imaginable, Sagamore's team of distillers crafts each spirit with a nod to both tradition and innovation. Find their signature Double Oak, Cask Strength, or Reserve Series ryes at a retailer near you. Visit sagamorespirit.com/find-rye. Please drink responsibly. I received a package of Arran single malt samples the other day, including the Arran Barrel Reserve matured in American oak and bottled at 43% ABV. The nose has touches of lemongrass, subtle spices, and peaches. The taste has lemon pepper spice with a bit of tartness and hints of butterscotch and toffee in the background. The finish, medium length with lingering lemon pepper spice. And I'm scoring the Arran Barrel Reserve an 89. Finally, let's look at the Arran Sauterne cask finish. This one is bottled at 50% ABV, and the nose has wood spices, dried grass, and black tea. The taste has a nice balance of cinnamon and allspice notes, with honey, black tea, and green grapes. The finish, long with touches of allspice and black tea with lemon. I'm scoring the Arran Sauterne cask finish a 92. The What I'm Tasting This Week department is brought to you by Sagamore Spirit. I'm adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 3,500 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at the all-new whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
A thoughtful gift is hard work. What you need is a go-to multi-purpose gift for all occasions. A bottle of Redbreast can say, enjoy every minute, they grow up so fast. Oh. And equally nails, apologies for the back pain, I should have just hired a moving company.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's open up the inbox now for our community segment, brought to you by Waterford Whiskey. Hugh posted this comment in the WhiskyCast community app. You mentioned on the last podcast the additive and subtractive effects of cask aging that get us our beloved whiskey. That got me wondering about whether that subtractive part is what the rapid aging efforts are missing. That is, I've read they put wood chips in with the whiskey in a pressure tank. Not a scientist, but I can imagine an argument that this could impart some flavor to the whiskey quickly, like an instant pot maybe, but how do they try to recreate the subtractive filtering that is critical? That's the problem with so-called rapid aging technologies. They don't allow for the subtractive effects to take place over time, and that is something you can't rush. I mentioned the passing of the Bon Accord's Paul McDonagh this week during the news. Some of the comments posted in the app this week. Craig posted from Scotland, absolutely gutted. He was an incredible person. Any time I ever spent in his company was an absolute pleasure. Always full of advice, and you always felt like you were the only person in the room. I've never met anyone like him, and the whiskey community has lost a pillar and a figurehead. And Whiskey Slayer posted this comment, R.I.P. Paul, a class act who I had the pleasure of sharing several drams with, a great ambassador for whiskey. He will be missed. I had the chance to meet Paul several times, and we did a WhiskyCast HD segment with him back in 2011 at the Bon Accord. You can find it on our YouTube channel, and I agree, he will be missed. If you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, just download the free WhiskyCast community app from the Apple or Google App Stores and join the conversation. You can also find us on Threads, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, and my email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Our community segment is sponsored by Waterford Whiskey, where they explore the frontiers of natural flavor one farm at a time to create unique Irish whiskies. Visit them on the web at waterfordwhiskey.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. We've talked about the differences between sour mash and sweet mash distilling before. Basically, the sour mash process takes backset, liquid left over after the distilling process, and adds it back into the fermenter along with mash and fresh yeast. The backset helps adjust the pH factor of the mash while killing off bacteria that can affect fermentation. And most bourbon and rye distillers use a sour mash process, whether they specify it on the label or not. As we mentioned during the news, Hard Truth Distilling in Nashville, Indiana, has become known for its sweet mash ryes, and master distiller Brian Davis says it takes a lot of care in the distilling process.
To put it in its simplest terms, it's every single mash in, we use fresh water, fresh yeast, and fresh grain. So that's in its simplest terms, but a little bit more complicated than that because of the risk of bacterial takeover from the yeast and based on concerns for consistency, there are some protocols and some things that we have in place to address both of those that normally a sour mash process would address. So essentially, we've got a clean steam path from our cooker all through all of our piping where any of our mash is and into our fermenters. So at the end of a mash, when we knock out that mash and get it into the fermenter, once we empty a fermenter, we're able to put a tarp over the top of that fermenter and really create a pasteurizing steam environment that we pasteurize for about 2 hours. And then during that process, it eliminates any kind of bacterial problems that we might have. And then very, very strict and well adhered to SOPs in our whiskey making production so that our grain supply is very consistent. Our procedures are very consistent. The way we, take it off the still is very consistent. So that way, whenever, I'm tasting through a particular mash bill that I distilled this year, next year, or the next year, I'm going to have a through line of consistency there.
I'll admit to having a soft spot for Hard Truth Distilling since it's located just over the hill from where I went to high school in Indiana, and thanks to Brian Davis for the explanation. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com, or you can get us right away in the WhiskyCast community app. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com, along with the latest news, my tasting notes, and our archive of episodes that goes all the way back to 2005. Our free WhiskyCast community app is available in the Apple and Google App Stores. And you can always get in touch with us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at WhiskyCast. Of course, email's an option too. Our address is comments@whiskycast.com.
Find the new Dewar's 12-year-old and discover what all the awards are about. You can toast and thank me later. From Dewar's, the world's most awarded blend of Scotch whiskey.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever go out drinking with a peacock? Always the same. Few too many, tail feathers come out, drinks get knocked over, bartender's not happy, night's over before it started. All I'm saying is, don't be the peacock in your group.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2023, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.